Hello, I'm Sarah Campbell. It's day 24 of the US-Israel war with Iran, and over the next 10 or so minutes, we'll bring you our daily briefing with the key updates on the conflict. And let's start with some of today's main developments. President Trump halts plans to attack Iran's energy infrastructure after what he calls productive conversations with Tehran, but Iran denies the talks took place. The price of oil tumbles and stock markets surge as the global economy responds to Donald Trump's comments. Israel and Iran have continued to launch waves of attacks against each other. More heavy blasts were heard in Tehran this morning after Israel said it had begun wide-scale strikes targeting infrastructure. Israel's War Cabinet orders the military to accelerate the targeting of bridges over the Litani River in Lebanon, claiming they're being used for terrorist activity. The Lebanese president calls it a dangerous escalation. And we start in the US, ahead of a deadline that threatened to dramatically escalate America and Israel's war with Iran. President Trump says he has ordered the US military to postpone plans to attack Iran's energy infrastructure for 5 days, following what he called productive conversations about a complete and total resolution of hostilities. Iran's foreign ministry, however, says no such talks have taken place. Donald Trump had previously set a 48-hour deadline, which was due to expire today, for Iran to reopen the vital Strait of Hormuz shipping lane or face the obliteration of its power plants. The US president spoke to reporters this afternoon.
They called. I didn't call. They called. They want to make a deal. And we are very willing to make a deal. It's got to be a good deal. And it's got to be no more wars, no more nuclear weapons. We'll at some point very, very soon meet. We're doing a 5-day period. We'll see how that goes. And if it goes well, we're going to end up with settling this. Otherwise, we'll just keep bombing our little hearts out.
Well, let's speak to our State Department correspondent, Tom Bateman. Tom, so take us through how significant those comments are from the president and whether we think he's preparing for de-escalation.
Well, I think the first thing to say is there's still a big question mark over how real or developed these apparent talks actually are. I mean, you know, one person that has been talking a lot today is President Trump, but not necessarily to the Iranians. He's been in front of the media an awful lot in the last few hours. I think that is in part to try and calm the markets that were once again heading into a tailspin after that threat by him to obliterate Iran's power plants, a move that would had the potential to have a devastating effect on civilian life in Iran. Now, you know, what he is saying here is that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, his envoys, have been in contact with a top Iranian, he says, not saying who that is. A lot of speculation that it might be the parliamentary speaker in Tehran, but he has said that he is not in discussions with the Americans, although we do have a note from the Iranian Foreign Ministry saying that there were attempts by the Americans to pass notes, to pass messages to the Iranians via intermediaries. So clearly there is some attempt at contact here. Whether or not it gets to this stage of potentially, as is being speculated by some, particularly Israeli reports, that there could be talks between the Americans and the Iranians in Pakistan by the end of this week. That at the moment feels pretty far-fetched, I have to say. But Mr. Trump is putting this all in very glowing terms, talking about the potential for a deal being done that would reopen the Strait of Hormuz, that would end hostilities. I think it talks to the bind he remains in, trying to calm the markets, potentially through some form of negotiation with the Iranians, but at the same time keeping up this threat of overwhelming and massive military force. And here you have a president who is saying that, you know, they're potentially close to a deal. He was saying just on Friday that he wasn't interested in a ceasefire.
Tom Bateman in Washington, thank you. Well, within minutes of President Trump's post, there was an immediate reaction from the financial markets, with oil prices falling and stock markets rising. For more on this, I'm joined by our economics editor, Faisal Islam. And Faisal, it really was a remarkable reaction from the markets after those comments from President Trump.
Yeah, and it's been a wild ride all day. Certainly the initial reaction was in a kind of league of its own in terms of not just the oil market, though we'll come back to that in a second. You saw a reaction in stock markets, in markets also, quite importantly, for government debt, which has been an area where in the past President Trump has noticed, even as he claims to be immune from moves in other markets. But let's just take the oil market. It fell 14% in the minutes after President Trump posted that new news about conversations with Iran from his perspective. Then when Iran denied that, it was up 10%, the oil price, and then it moved more than 5% up or down a further 4 times, and the day's trading hasn't even finished yet. And it just shows you just how difficult it is to price risk in the current environment. I could tell similar stories about natural gas. I could tell you similar stories about government debt too, which frankly had started to get slightly worrying levels as the markets anticipated a wave of inflation coming from the Gulf, not just in terms of energy prices, but also in terms of fertilizer prices, affecting things like microchips, assuming essentially that this disruption was to last months rather than weeks as a result of the escalation that we had expected, frankly, from the comments yesterday. So that had meant that government bond yields, effectively the interest rate a government pays, had shot up in anticipation of banks, central banks having to combat a rise in inflation. Well, those assumptions then suddenly went away, and they came back and they went away. And these things, these bonds, these for the US and the UK, they're meant to be the safest thing around. They're meant to be the rock of stability. So that is just one example. We had it in the energy markets, the government debt markets. We had it to a lesser degree in the stock markets. They're all just trying to sort of process this information that, frankly, diplomats are finding it difficult to process about, firstly, how long this conflict is going to last and what the terms are going to be. But I think in general terms, there is also this fear now that even if it ended tomorrow, and it's not going to end tomorrow, but if it did end tomorrow, there would still be a scar on the world economy, a scar from things like production of gas from Qatar has been damaged and won't be fully recovered for years. You also have this just general fear now that the Iranians have demonstrated what they can do in the Straits of Hormuz. Will that ever truly go away? And so that is why you have rather a roller coaster. I think that's probably understating it across markets today.
Oh, indeed. Our economics editor, Faisal Islam, thank you. So how have Iranians reacted to President Trump postponing those strikes? BBC Persian has been speaking to people inside Iran. Their messages have been voiced up by our colleagues.
I think this will be very costly for the Iranian people. Whether Islamic Republic remains or realizes that it's on its last legs, it will increase the cost to the Iranian people as much as possible.
Did you see Trump's new message? It's driving us crazy.
Well, elsewhere in the region, Israel's defense minister has announced that Israel is expanding its ground campaign in Lebanon against the Iran-backed group Hezbollah. Israel Katz has ordered the destruction of all crossings over the Litani River, alleging they're being used by Hezbollah to move weapons towards Israel. Lebanon's president says this will hamper humanitarian efforts. More than 1,000 people have been killed in Lebanon and over 1 million displaced. But one man from the south says he will return.
No matter how much they destroy and do, we will still manage to reach our lands. This is our country. We know how to get to our villages. There are mountains, there are valleys. Let them cut off the roads. No matter how many roads they cut off, we will return. We will go back to our land.
Let's go back to the main development today, and President Trump says Iran has one more chance at peace, as Tehran calls reports of US talks fake news. So what are the chances for diplomacy in this conflict? For more, I'm joined by our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette. Lise, hello to you. And lots of people on YouTube and TikTok are asking if those talks have actually happened. President Trump has been speaking about them in detail, but Iran has denied any dialogue with the US.
Yes, I think President Trump always has a certain way of speaking. It's often bombastic language, a little bit embroidered, but it does seem that something is happening. But to call them talks may be to exaggerate a bit. Perhaps it's talks about talks, because they will be indirect. The United States and Iran don't have diplomatic relations. They did have face-to-face talks during a decade ago, during the first rounds of the Iran that resulted in the Iran nuclear deal of 2015. In the last year, and in fact up until February, they were having mostly indirect talks with President Trump's envoy. So what we understand after this back and forth all day, as you just mentioned, the Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghai has now confirmed that, as he put it, friendly countries are putting forward proposals. And we understand that those are probably Turkey, Egypt, Pakistan, three majority Muslim countries who have been working with Arab states during this war, and in fact are all very close to President Trump, and importantly are not getting attacked by Iran in the way that Gulf states are. So something is happening. Whether or not they will result in talks being held at the end of the week in Pakistan, that's another report. Iran will be very, very cautious, because don't forget, they were in talks in February. The United States and Israel came out of them and started this war. Same thing happened in June last year, and President Trump pulled out of the first Iran nuclear deal.
There was a huge amount of concern about that deadline that had been set for tonight. So the fact that that's been withdrawn, people are asking, could this mark a turning point in the conflict?
It certainly pulled the war back from a very dangerous brink. For President Trump to have threatened to bomb, to destroy Iran's nuclear its energy infrastructure, which would have literally plunged Iran into the dark, would have sent oil prices soaring, would have put the region even on greater edge. The phone lines must have been burning with people from around the region, and hopefully within his inner circle, saying, you can't do this. So he's found a way to climb down. He blinked. Iran, of course, will see this as their victory because they didn't bow down. Is President Trump, as we just heard from Faisal, playing to the markets? One Iranian analyst said to me, maybe it's a ruse, but at least it has calmed the temperature. And let us hope, or many will hope, this creates an opening. But then others say, all of the war for this, and you're still dealing with a very conservative leader, Mohammad Bagher Ghabalov, who is very close to the Islamic Revolutionary Guards.
Always good to talk to you. Thank you. Our Chief International Correspondent, Lise Doucette. Well, whether you're joining us on YouTube, TikTok, Sounds, radio or television, thank you for your time. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the Iran War Today.